put this in perspective, Steph Curry is the 5th player since the merger to average 40 points on 50% shooting during a 10-game span. That is outstanding. Nick, how impressive has Steph's run been?
Oh, I think it's very important that we take a moment and understand and appreciate what we're seeing. So this is not the greatest scoring stretch ever. I know nobody has a memory anymore, but Jenna, you said it's the 11th straight 30-point game. James Harden, just 2 years ago, had 32 straight 30-point games. We have seen guys, whether it was Kobe in 06, whether it was Harden 2 years ago, Jordan is 37-point per game year. We have seen guys score at this volume and at a higher volume. What we are seeing is not only the greatest shooter ever, but the greatest shooter ever having his greatest shooting stretch ever. This is the basketball version of Barry Bonds in 2001, minus the asterisks. This is the guy who is the greatest to ever do something, doing it at the highest level he has ever done it at. So we have quite literally, in sports history, never seen what has happened over the last week. Some context for it, this was Steph's 4th 10 3-pointer game in the last 8 days. That means the last 8 days alone would give him the 2nd most in the history of basketball for a player's career. Only Clay has more than that with 5. Look at that. Steph has 21 for his career. Clay has 5. Steph's got 4 since last Monday. And then there's Harden, Dame, and J.R. Smith. Shout out J.R. with 3. So this is the best to ever do something, doing it the best he's ever done it. So if you want to call, this is his version of Brady's 07 season or Bonds' 01.
Right.
This is a shooting stretch by a shooter that will, I believe, never be matched except for by this player if he does it himself again.
You know who else was impressed by what Steph did last night? Magic Johnson. Magic said Steph Curry left no doubt about who the real MVP is tonight. So then let's spin this forward, Brandon. Has Steph's recent surge put him in the MVP conversation?
Woo! Jenna, what he's doing is absurd. Nick just said it. And it's how he's doing it, guys. I mean, he's doing it off the dribble. He's doing it off the pick. He's doing it with his left hand, right hand, and ones. It's unbelievable what he's doing. But if we're going to dive into the MVP discussion, let's go back to Chris Bouchard's criteria, MVP criteria, individual statistics, individual performance, team record, supporting cast, historical precedent, historical significance. So when you look at all of those things that Chris laid out, and he's been voting for years, you gotta consider that this is less than 20% of the NBA season. So it's amazing. Right. We've never seen anything like this, but we're talking about 3 weeks in April. So all those numbers you just laid out, Nick, phenomenal. 54 3-pointers in 6 games, and you can go on and on and on. But it's only 20% of the season, and your team isn't even in the playoffs. You're in the play-in. You're the 9th seed in the West. And this is even a bigger conversation than one we started weeks ago about should Steph stay here. But we can shelve that conversation for a later time. But to answer your question, wow, he is not in the MVP discussion. This is something that should be celebrated. It's something that we should talk about. But you got to focus on Joel Embiid and Joker out in Denver.
Okay, it's a trick question. Should Steph be in the NBA MVP conversation? If you're having the discussion, he's in the discussion. So yes, the answer is he belongs in the conversation. But to make it simpler, we just have to look at PER, Nick. The last 4 MVPs have led the league in PER. Joker leads the league in PER. Joker should be the front runner. Steph is top 5 PER, but he's behind guys like Zion and Kawhi. And while they're in the discussion, we don't give them any real chance at winning it. So the question is this, Nick. Can Steph do anything moving forward to move him up the ballot? They've got 14 games left. Granted, they're in 9 right now. But if they can somehow go on a torrid winning streak, is there any chance, anything he can do to move him way up in your ballot?
Yeah, so Denver got a good double overtime win last night. Joker is the overwhelming favorite, and that win kept them steady in 4th. But if they were to drop to 5, and if the Warriors were to somehow get to 6, and if it's like, okay, so the Warriors are out of the play-in, now they're only 1 spot behind Denver, then I think he'd be in the discussion. Right now, he is not in the discussion, or he should not be. But I would argue, Brandon, he has gotten something more valuable. Because Steph has won an MVP, and then he won a unanimous MVP. There was, for me, going into this season, a legitimate question to be asked about Steph, because we hadn't seen it. Can you put him on a terrible team and he carries them to relevance and playoff contention, not championship contention? And he answered that. He has answered that resoundingly yes. The discussion with Steph 3 weeks ago, Brandon, was wow. Right, exactly right. It was, look at how bad the Warriors have been. Steph's going to miss the playoffs. They're going to be the 12th seed in the West. And he responded to that by averaging 40 a night and putting them on his back. For me, for him historically, that's more valuable than another top 3 MVP finish, because it answers a question that was unanswered prior to this year, and it was an important one, and he's answering it resoundingly.
Yeah. And the only thing out there that we can compare this to is 2016 Russell Westbrook. 2016 Russell Westbrook, what were they, the 3rd or the 4th seed? The 4th seed. They were, they weren't great, but what he did it all year. We're talking about every game we're watching, triple-double, triple-double, triple-double. So for him to move up that ballot, Wilds, Jenna, he has to continue this run throughout the remainder of the season, and I just don't see that happening. What he's doing is phenomenal. Needs to be celebrated, but right now we can't just say, oh, he's the clear-cut MVP like Russell Wilson. I hear you football players out there, Mike Evans, be quiet. What are y'all talking about? Talking about he's the MVP. Stop it.
All right, we will get to see the MVP perhaps again tomorrow night. Warriors